Excellent. So welcome Samuel Hill, also known as Ultrarunner Sam, to your podcast. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Did I get that right, the intro?
Yeah, close enough. It'll do.
So I guess we better just have a little explanation to your viewers and listeners as to why some random guy is on your podcast interviewing you. So it's true to say you've just had a little walk out, haven't you? Stretch the legs in the northern part of the Pennines. And tongue in cheek, I sent you a message, didn't I, saying looking forward to hearing all the tales of woe, and I'm looking forward to interviewing you on your podcast. And you sort of called my bluff, didn't you? So here we are on your podcast. So yeah, so we're going to get into this, so all things spine, aren't we? I think it's true to say that you've had many people on the podcast, and the spine's a big topic, hasn't it? So keep into the format of your podcast, you normally ask people, well, what's your backstory? How did you get into running? And, you know, we've heard tales of injured knees, snowboarding, triathlon, and all this. But, you know, probably your opportunity now just to tell perhaps people that have listened to the podcast for quite a while, exactly, you know, Samuel Hill, what's his background? How did he get into the spine? How did you get yourself to this point?
Okay. How far back do you want me to go?
Well, what you normally say is as much or as little as you want.
That is true. Okay, we'll go way back then. I suppose running wise, I've always sort of dabbled. At school, I was more of I'm built like a sprinter, and actually that was my forte. Like 100 meters and 200 meters were my distances in school. I also did a bit of athletics, so I did a bit of discus and shot put. Being broadly built but short, I managed, and then kind of went through school doing that. Always was kind of sporty, so when I was in my teens, I was skateboarding and then snowboarding. I know I've talked about this before. Got into any action sport I was interested in. I did a bit of cycling, so I used to cycle to work. So I've always been active, more or less. But running seriously was probably, I started running seriously when I was about 21. Something like that. I'd gone through a bit of a rough time in life. My dad had died when I was 18, left the family in a bit of a mess.
Wow, yeah.
I'd sort of gone down a bit of a black hole, bit of a spiral in life, and was depressed, overweight, had issues with substances, drinking and other things. It was a bit of a low point in my life, and I just decided that one day I just needed to, for my own mental sanity. Well, actually, it was after I was on antidepressants, and I'd sort of went back to the doctor and said to him how I just felt a bit numb and didn't really feel like they were doing anything. And he suggested trying to get off them, which was, I think, in hindsight, was great. But he suggested getting into a bit of exercise to try and alleviate the sort of symptoms of depression. And I thought, what can I do? What's the the easiest thing for me to do? I've done a bit of cycling, but I thought, I fancy doing a bit more running to sort of try and push it out a bit further. So just started off with literally just running to the end of the street where I lived, and that was enough. Out of breath, overweight, struggling to breathe. Yeah, the lamppost, just to the lamppost and back. Slowly pushed that out. Got myself some weights at home, and I just got into this. Went through, that was kind of the end of summer, and I sort of had about 3 or 4 months of just purely running 2 or 3 times, about 3 times a week, and doing weights. Really threw myself into it and went from sort of running to the end of the street to running to the next street and coming back to running all the, where I grew up in Burton-on-Trent, running all the way down to the river, running along the river, across the bridge and back, and ended up sort of running 3 to 4 times a week for at least an hour, and decided that running was my thing because it made me feel better mentally. I felt more relaxed and good about myself, lost a load of weight doing that as well, and just thought running's my thing now. I need to stick to it. So that was 20, what am I now, 42, 20 years ago, 21 years ago of running. And I'd always kind of got to the point where I would never really run long enough to be able to have the confidence to put in for a race, until a mate of mine suggested that I do a half marathon, and it was the Robin Hood half marathon in Nottingham. So I worked myself up to that, trained for that for about 6 months, something like that. Did that. Took me about 2 hours to do, struggled around it, I had bleeding nipples with a white t-shirt.
We've all been there.
all the classic first time running experiences that you can have. But loved it, and decided I wanted to go under 2 hours. So I booked another one for like a month later, and then became obsessed with running half marathons for a bit. Got my time down a little bit, but not much. And then a mate of mine said, this is all while the triathlon thing is going on at the same time as well. So I was doing sort of sprint triathlons and Olympic distance triathlons. And one of my mates, Gid, who you know from lives in Devon now, he was talking about doing a full Ironman. And I said, I couldn't quite comprehend doing a full Ironman because you've got the swimming, the biking, and then you've got a full marathon at the end. And I said, I don't, even feel like I've got the time to train for a marathon, let alone train for all of those 3 things and complete them. But so I thought, what I'll try and do is, I know I can do the biking because I've done loads of road cycling, and swimming, more or less I could get there, just not great at it. I'm okay at swimming, but it's a bit longer swimming. But the running, I really need to sort of knuckle down with that. So I decided to try and push out as far as I could and get the distance up. And then a mate of mine, Sir Sweats a lot, Mark Beardsley.
Yeah, I do know him.
Sir Sweats a lot, as he's known in our circle.
Sweats a lot, yeah.
Because he does sweat a lot. He said, I'm going to go and do the Erewash Trail, I think it is, around Ilkeston, which is roughly about 30 miles. And he said, do you fancy doing it? I was like, well, not even run a marathon yet, so I don't know how I'm going to do 30 miles. So I was like, well, there's plenty of places you can sort of cut back in again and finish and get picked up if you want to, because it's a circular route. You don't have to do the full 30 miles. We'll see how far we can get. So my first actual marathon was an ultra marathon. So I ran with him, and we got to the marathon point, and I was actually feeling really good, and he was like feeling destroyed and was wanting to walk, and I was like, I feel really good. This is great. I didn't think I'd feel this good. And we carried on and finished the 30 miles. And I thought, well, there you go. I'm an ultra runner now. I've done 30 miles. That's it. I don't even need to run marathons anymore. I'm an ultra runner. So this sort of set me off thinking about races that I could do. And I thought, really want to do a 50 miler. So I had a look to see where the nearest local 50 miler was. And there was one, the Lady Bower 50, which happens in September. I think it's still going, where you run around Lady Bower Reservoir and Derwent Reservoir. And it's like 5 loops of those reservoirs makes up 50 miles. And I remember being quite annoyed that it was like 51.5 miles, and I'd not quite comprehended how ultras are measured and and how they're not bang on the mileage that they tell you they are. And so I was like really annoyed that I'd still got like 1.5 miles to go at the end of this 50-mile ultra that I was struggling to get around in the heat. And that was pretty much, so that would have been by that point 2000 and what would that have been, 2010 maybe, something like that.
Can't,
quite remember.
I guess ultras weren't the big thing then, were they? In that?
No, not really. It was yeah, and I think Mark had lent me Dean Karnaz's book. You know, the book that everybody's read.
Yeah.
That you know that he's got. I think if he had like $1 for every time somebody said that he was the reason that they got into ultra running, they'd probably have more money than he got from writing that book.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, and that sort of began my obsession with ultras. And after that, I just kind of just tried to do an ultra, at least one ultra every year. You know, 2 ultras. Just picked out local ones like the Nomad one that goes around Derby. Various ones in the Peak District, just trying to find ones that are a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
Met up with our mutual friend Andy Holt.
Yeah.
Part of the it's a running club he's in.
He's
The
Brown
Dark Peak,
Peak.
the brown runners.
The brown runners, yeah.
like the green runners, but the brown runners. No, Dark Peak fell runners.
Yeah.
And Andy took me on my first. I mean, I thought I had done like ultras, trail ultras, and in the Peak District, but he took me on some adventures where we sort of went off grid and went a proper over, you know, into the back of Kinder and everything, and showed me some off the tracks kind of stuff. And in fact he was the first one that, even though I knew what the Pennine Way was, he was the first one that sort of talked to me about the spine race and what it was, and he scared the life out of me by saying that he'd put in to do the Challenger South, and the qualifications just to be able to enter the race. You've got to be able to prove that you can handle yourself in winter and be exposed, and all this kit that you've got to have, and even if you apply, you're not necessarily going to get accepted and stuff because of your experience. So I always thought, well, fair play to him. That's kind of a race that I'll probably never do, especially when he talked about the full distance being the 268 miles of the Pennine Way. I thought, that's kind of like next level kind of stuff. It's not really going to be anything that I'll be interested in doing. And then, as it happens, just over the years, I've grown more and more interested in the race. I'm going on to the next subject now, aren't I? Did you want to just?
Yeah, well, we can do. I mean, thanks for being so honest though, Sam. I think everybody, well, not everyone, but a lot of people will relate to some of the things you've said. How running's become part of their lives for reasons that you've stated. Massive help when it comes to mental health or dealing with things. Being able to channel it into something that's wholesome for body and mind.
Yeah,
so,
that's it.
Right. But yeah, so going back onto the spine. I mean, I joked with you, haven't I? Calling it the spine podcast, and I'm sick of hearing about the spine and the spine, this spine, the other. But in fairness, you've had some big names on your podcast. When you think of someone like Damien Hall, and I think of him, I think of the spine, or Jack Scott. Relatively, I didn't know a lot about him. And the lady Hannah Hickman. Yeah, she came second. And then I know John Shield. He's done some of the spines. So tell us a little bit more about the spines for people like me. I know there's 4 races. Is there 4 or 3?
Yes, so there's the Sprint, Challenger South, Challenger North, and then the full. Yeah, the full.
Yeah. And
so
they're done over winter and summer, aren't they?
Yeah, so the full, all those distances, the 4 races, they've been done in winter already, but they've now, this year was the first time they did the Challenger North as a summer race. So I think it just, before it used to be just like Challenger South. It was called something else, wasn't it, before that? Before it was called Challenger South and North. So the race that I did last week was the first, the inaugural running of the Challenger North in summer.
Right.
So now.
Yeah, good, excellent. So it was just, it's been done in the winter before, hasn't it? The North.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, they did it last winter. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, mate of mine, Simon Roberts.
Yeah, Simon. Yeah, he blasted it, didn't he?
Yeah, Yeah, he's a great guy, Simon. He's a humble guy. He's an ordinary guy, but exceptional.
Yeah,
As well. Nice to have those two qualities, isn't it? To be absolutely awesome. Same time, sort of just a humble, down to earth person. So yeah, so why the fascination with the spine? I mean, I guess people, you know, I don't know, it might be some of the big rounds. I want to do the Bob Graham, I want to do the Paddy Buckley or the Ramsey or the Dragon's Back or all the other, you know, I don't know, abroad, some of the big events abroad. Why the spine for you? Why the spine?
I think it just represents the British ultra running at its pinnacle. I think like it's the race that everybody wants to win and gets the most. Not that, you know, not for that reason that it gets the most media coverage or anything like that, but I think it's just got a bit of something attached to it that other races have, but not as much as the spine. I think it's viewed as, I think because of how difficult it is, I think people have a lot of respect for it, and it, you know, it is called Britain's most brutal race, and anyone that's done it, especially in the winter, can testify to that. And I think my obsession with it just was sort of just being curious about what it takes to kind of go that far in those kind of conditions. I think, you know, because I've always kind of stayed in my own comfort zone, and part of that was my wife we've been quite vocal over the years about her not wanting me to do like 100 milers and above. And she'd got this thing where she was convinced that if I did 100 miler that I would die. And she stuck to that for years. And she, you know, she used to say, I'll let you do 100 miler if you buy me a horse. Knowing full well that I can't afford to buy her a horse. So that was out of the window. But as time's gone on, she's realized that I'm probably not kind of fulfilling my potential in ultra running, that I'm quite happy to do 50 milers and 100k and you know, and do well at them. You know, won a few races over the years, and I think she now kind of has enough faith in me to say, okay, you're allowed to, you know, and I'm a good husband. I would never go and say, well, I'm going to go and do this race. You know, stuff you, I'm going to go and do this race because I want to do it. You know, I'd like to think that I have a lot of respect for my wife, and we have a brilliant marriage. So over the years, I've kind of kept to that promise that I wouldn't do a 100 miler. And then this year, when I won a place in the volunteer lottery for the spine, because I've obviously volunteered for a couple of years, helped out on the media at Checkpoint, and then helped out on media last year. She could see how much the race meant to me. And because I'd won this place, and I said, well, you know, that I get the option of what distance I want to do. And she was like, you've picked the full one, haven't you? The whole race. And I was like, yeah, okay. And she was like, fine, I know you're going to do it eventually, so you may as well just do it. So that was how I went from only running 100Ks to doing 160 miler last week, and then being signed up to do the full winter spine in January. So that's got us to where we are now.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, because I think it does affect our families, doesn't it? We take on such a big challenge. I mean, my wife's always driving around in little places in the Lake District to get a car in, or in Snowdonia. This weekend we had an ultra, and she's there, you know, at the checkpoints. And sometimes, not that we take it for granted, but our decisions can affect others, can't they? So shout out. Yeah.
Shout out to the wives.
Shout out to the wives and the women.
Wives and husbands, girlfriends,
yeah.
and children and dogs.
Yeah. Dogs always got to be there. Good, excellent. So tell us a story then. So the Spine Challenger North, it's 160 miles. You've got 90 hours to complete it. It's 5,290 meters of ascent, according to their website. It starts in North Yorkshire, finishes on the Scottish borders. How did you prepare for that? Where did you start? What's the mindset?
Yeah, I think that was the question that that he asked me when I got to the finish, like, how do you prepare for 160 miles? And my genuine answer was like, I don't think you can prepare for 160 miles. I don't think, there's no training plans for, couched 160-mile ultra on the Pennine Way. It just doesn't exist. So I think for me, having come off, telling the old story again of injuries, having come off like more or less like 2 years of being injured, not being injured, doing a race, getting through a race, doing okay, being injured again. I'd kind of, at the end of 2022, I'd kind of got to the point where I was fed up with being injured. So I decided to just completely stop running and focus on getting strong again and going to the gym. So I think it was like the end of November, start of December, I joined the local gym and decided that my focus wasn't going to be running for the first at least 3 months of the year. It was going to be focused on just getting strong, getting my knee to the point where it didn't hurt after every single run, because that's what I was up against. I'd been to the doctors about it, had been referred for x-rays, got referred for an MRI, found that I've got degenerative tears in my meniscus, but they're not bad enough to operate on. And in hindsight, I'm glad that they weren't bad enough to be operated on, because people talk about, once they had the operation, that things weren't any good anyway. So the orthopedic specialist just said, you've got to like change a few things to try and live with it, and do your best to get around it. So I went back to basics and changed my shoes. I went away from my beloved ultras with the 0 drop to just try and get a different running gait and running form, try to increase my cadence, just try to work on stuff to do with form and not putting the forces through my knee in the same way, trying to do more trail, whereas traditionally my bread and butter mileage was commuting backwards and forwards to work, and I found that easy, that I could tick off nearly 15 miles a day just commuting backwards and forwards to work, and it just became part of my life. That wasn't really an issue, and just training just was not easy, but I could accumulate sort of 60, 70 miles easily in a week without really even putting much effort into to alter my schedule. So I kind of went back to the basics with cut all my mileage down in the gym, strengthening my legs up. But at the same time, this was, mid-January was when, no, it was not mid-January, sort of mid-February was when, after I'd been to the Spine again to volunteer, and then the lottery places came up and my name was drawn. So I was in this situation where I knew that by the end of this year, I needed to be ready to do the full Spine. I was only running sort of 30, 40 miles a week, something like that, reasonably comfortably, whilst going to the gym 3 times a week, sorting my knee out. So I thought, I've got to do something big between now and the end of the year to sort of give me the confidence to know that my knee, firstly, that my knee is going to be okay and get through it. And secondly, get experience on a long route to know that I can run further than 100K. Because, as far as I know, I've only ever ran sort of 67 miles. No, when I went off course last year, when I did the High Peak 100, I did close to like 70 miles. Went off route a little bit. So as far as I knew,
massive jump up in mileage.
Yeah. So I don't think that I could. I don't think I could have sort of prepared. I mean, if I was going to prepare myself properly for 160 miles, it would take at least 6 months, and I didn't really have that. I kind of put in for it on the last day that you could put in for it, which was, only trying to think when that was, probably like a month ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that. So I'd kind of built my mileage up, and I just thought I was at the point where my knee felt good, my mileage was still building, and I think I peaked 2 weeks out from the race with an 80-mile week.
Yeah.
And when we went to Italy, I did a 70-mile week there. So that gave me the confidence in my knee to know that I could get through an 80-mile week, and that
You survived that descent.
yes, yeah. Whereas traditionally, like my mileage, I could run 70 to 80 miles a week for like weeks on end, for a training block. So although I wasn't prepared as much as I probably would have been a few years ago for doing it, I think I was more mentally prepared for the epicness and the length of the race. I think that, I was talking to a few people on the race, and they were sort of saying that they've not had the best training for it. But the consensus was always that, training will get you so far on any of the spine races, but having the mindset of getting to the finish is probably gonna get you through those miles more than having the confidence of running 4 weeks of 80 miles and having that as your backup, rather than doing all that training and then getting 100 miles into the 160 miles and realizing you haven't got the mental fortitude to finish the race. So I think I kind of prepared myself mentally for the challenge, rather than so physically I was sort of peaking, but not to the level that I would have liked to, but mentally I was ready for it, I think.
Yeah, good. And I think the people I've spoken to said it's just more than running. It's an expedition. It's about
it's like an
yourself. And problem solving along the way. I guess that's with any ultra, but even more so with that sort of distance. So
definitely problem solving. I know, just not expecting. I mean, the things that came up that weren't expected was like the blisters. The whole issue with blisters, because I only ever had one bad blister from ultra running. That was in my early days when I did the Isle of Wight challenge and did that, ran around the Isle of Wight, 100k. There you go. And there was a bit of running on the beaches, and I got sand in my shoes and got sand in a blister, which just like made it bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the end, it was a massive blister on the side of my foot. And I always, swore that I would always sort my feet out if I ever had issues in a race. If a bit of dirt got in, or sand or grit or anything, I would always, like we've said, always be bothered, always stop, clean your shoes out. That's it. Always be bothered, clean your shoes out, get your feet right. So years and years of ultra running, and I've never had any issues with blisters since, until this race, where it was quite ridiculous.
What sort of mileage did they come in at? And obviously you set off at is it 6 p.m. on a Sunday evening?
That's it. So that was so it was a weird start time. So I think they're obviously staggered for a reason, to do with like checkpoints, and with the full spine coming behind, they wanted to make the most of the checkpoints and have people in them, so they're not stood around waiting for other races to come through. So it made sense for the race to start there at 6. And so we started off at Hard Draw, and looked at the weather, and it had predicted like heavy rain, heavy showers for 6 o'clock, and bang on 6 o'clock, just before the race started, it was torrential rain, absolutely came flooding down. Everyone was scrambling to get in the tents, scrambling to put all the waterproofs on. Nikki Spinks was there, actually. She was shout out to Nikki. She was there in the tent. She was like laughing at me, like struggling to get all of my waterproofs on. And I told her that I'd rather be volunteering like she was than doing the race, and she told me to do one basically and get out there and get on with it. And so we set off up, and Hard Draw, you straight up onto Great Shunner Fell from there. So literally, you come out of the campsite, the start, and it's basically 5 miles of climbing to the top of Shunner Fell. So it's exactly 5 miles from the campsite up to the top of Shunner Fell. So we're just climbing straight up the hill, trying not to go too quick, trying to keep it steady and just power hike up with the cheat sticks. But as we were going up, you could see the lightning at the top of Shunner Fell, like in the clouds, like you could see the lightning. And I thought, this this isn't the best start. I'd envisioned, like, weeks before the race, I knew that, you know, it'd been hot. We'd had like 30 degrees. I was thinking, the thing I'm going to be worried about is getting sunburn on this race. But that was nothing to worry about at the time, because as soon as we set off, it felt like winter. So ideal training for, for the full winter race. But as we're sort of climbing up, powering up Great Shunnafell, you can see this lightning in the distance. And I thought that, just this sort of set the tone for the next 2 to 3 days of how things are going to be. And it's, ran through the night. I was really pleased because I'd never done that before. Even, ran into the night, ran early in the morning, but I'd never ran continuously for 24 hours. It was unknown territory for me. Most of the 100Ks I'd done sort of ranged between like 10, 11 hours, like up to like 15 hours of being on your feet, but never through the night into the next day and into the next evening, which happened. So I think we got absolutely soaked. Everybody was completely soaked by the torrential rain going up onto Shunner. And then it carried on drizzling, start rain, more or less through the night until we got to the first checkpoint, which was Middleton.
So
it was got there about 3:30 in the morning, something like that, and had a big plate of curry and rice with naan bread, and filled up, and took my shoes off, had a look at my feet, and they were wet, they were soaked through, and when they go all sort of, like when you've been in the bath too long, they were all like that. So I dried them off, changed my socks, and set off again, and felt good. And I thought, this is, I can do this. It's all right. It's a new day. I had a bit of coffee. Felt like the sun started to come up at about, because it's like near the longest day.
In the morning, it's light, isn't it?
Yeah, super light. Around 4:30, the sun came up. Felt like a new day, and I felt really, really good until probably like another 10, 15 miles in, started to feel the hot spots in my feet. And I knew there was something sort of brewing with my feet, and that something.
What sort of mileage would that be? What sort of mileage would you?
So let's have a think. So it would have been, it's 35 miles to 35. Was it 35 miles or 37 miles to Middleton? So another 15 miles after that. Yeah, so around the 50 to 60 mile mark.
Yeah,
my feet started to, I think I'd sort of joked that I'd had blisters for 100 miles. So that's probably more or less. So I stopped, took my shoes off, changed my socks, put some body glide all over my feet, hoping that would sort of stave off the blisters, but put my shoes back on again, set off, and I just knew that blisters were going to be an issue from that point on, and they were. So after that point, I kind of trotted on through Cauldron Snout. That was a bit of a low point for me. I think I was just like low on energy, low on calories, because I'd sort of gone through the night. And that bit is it's quite demoralizing, Cauldron Snout, because as soon as you drop into that valley, all like phone signal disappears. There's nothing, absolute complete black spot there. And you run along the side of the river, and then the path just disappears. So all you've got is these like rocks and boulders that are coming down off the hillside that are just going into the river, and you've got to negotiate your way across these boulders. And obviously it's been raining, they're all wet, they're all slimy and polished, got lichen all over them. So there's all this green lichen that's all on them, and all I couldn't get this thought out of my head. I must have been a bit delirious, because I kind of made the joke to myself out loud, that a dad joke, that I'm not liking this because of the lichen, and then I just couldn't get this stupid thought out of my head that I'm not liking this all the way. And it felt like it took me 2 hours to get across these rocks, and it didn't. In reality, it was probably like half an hour of like scrambling over these rocks and getting to the point where it is then actually more or less a trail again. But then you go around a sharp bend and there's Cauldron Snout, like the waterfall is there in front of you, and that is like spectacular. So I stopped and took some videos, took some photos, and then I was like, right, okay, I need to get moving now. Right, where's the path? And you realise that the path is just basically just like you've got to scramble up the rocks at the side of the waterfall. Yeah, get up there.
Got a gill scrambling.
Yeah, and so scrambled to the top of there and took another video of that, and then just trotted on. Got to actually, it was one of the good things about the races that they put a Starlink around that point further on. So when you got to, as you were getting to Horton, there was a point where there's nothing there basically. It's just like bleakness in every direction. But there was a little farm at the side of the trail, and they'd got a Starlink set up. So all you had to do was literally just go and stand by the Starlink, and you got full phone signal, full internet signal.
Oh, wow.
So that was at about 7 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. So I sat down, got my phone out, and did a video call to the kids like in the morning while they're getting up for breakfast and getting up for school and everything.
That's still alive.
Yeah. So I just had a quick chat with the girls to just tell them that I'd survived the night and I'd gone through the night okay, and I was feeling, relatively okay, and then set off again from there.
Did that give you a boost? Seeing the girls?
It did, yeah. It was good to chat to the family. Felt nice. I felt connected to him again. Because at that point I'd not seen anybody for ages. There was nobody behind me, nobody ahead of me, and I felt like I was a bit on my own a little bit there.
Yes.
A bit bleak. So sort of trotted on from that point on, trying to get some calories down me. Met up with stopped to sort my feet out, and when I stopped I realized that there was 2 people behind me sort of in the distance. So while I was faffing around with my socks and doing whatnot and had a bit of food, they caught up with me. So I sort of carried on with them, talking to them. I realized I'd slowed down a lot at that point because of my feet, because they were just power hiking, and I was like struggling to keep up with them walking. And I was like, this, they're only walking, they're only power hiking. They were fast hiking, but I felt like my running pace was kind of there fast at that point because my feet hurt so much. It was like similar, and I'm thinking I'm wasting so much energy by trying to run, and they're like plowing through power hiking. And I was like, so right, okay, I need to just sort of stick with them. So I stayed with them, chatted with them. We got to where is it? Hike up Nick. We got to there expecting a spectacular view of that, but it was all fogged out. So it's just, they took a photo and it just looks rubbish. But when the fog cleared, when you could see it, it's absolutely spectacular. That is Hike up Nick, that view. But the fog just got...
Is that where you've got Hike up Nick? You've got the Great Dun Fell, is it? And then Cross Fell
after that. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So you drop down off Hike up Nick, drop down to, is that Horton? I can't remember the name. And then you go up onto Dodfell, and that just seems, you feel like you're climbing forever to get up onto Crossfell. Just like up, and step up again. And then you get up onto Crossfell, and I felt good getting up onto the top of Crossfell. Had a bit of food there, but then coming down off Crossfell, it's just a long track that is, it's just like somebody described it as like somebody emptied a load of brick ends over a path.
I know the track well, yeah.
And it just goes on forever, and it doesn't feel, it's not comfortable to run on because of these like broken bits of rock that's strewn all over it. So you kind of like begrudgingly running on it, trying to find a smooth bit to run on, to not be kicking stones all the time. And my feet from that point were just like absolutely in agony, just with blisters.
You're in pain. It wasn't just like an irritation. You're in pain.
No, it was proper pain, hot spots, the balls of my feet and my heels, and I could feel them forming on my toes, on the ends of my toes as well.
Oh wow.
so I knew that I was basically, from that point on, it was just a case of trying to, survive my feet. So I felt rough coming down there, slowed down quite a bit, and then the heat, it was starting to warm up. So by this point, it was sort of tea time on the Monday. The heat was quite warm, the sun was out, so I was running along the side of the river, heading for Alston, for the checkpoint there. Got to Alston.
Checkpoint 2, is it? Alston?
Yeah, that's it. Yes,
okay,
on the north.
Yeah.
Got in, felt really good about getting into Alston, and I thought, I feel tired. This will be a good chance to sleep. So I went, got a bed, went and had a shower, cleaned my teeth. Had before that, I had a bit of food, so I had the famous Alston lasagna. I had a few bowls of that. Had a shower, cleaned my teeth, got my sleep kit out, which was earplugs and a face mask. Unfortunately, there was only me in the room at the time. A guy, when I got there, he'd left. He'd had like an hour, and he'd gone. And I set my alarm for 3 hours, thinking that there's no way I'll sleep for 3 hours. I'll just literally just probably snooze and then wake up. But if I do sleep, then 3 hours is my limit, because that's 2 full sleep cycles, so 90 minutes and 90 minutes. That'll make me, if I wake up at 3 hours, that'll be good, 2 full cycles. So I managed to just like fall asleep instantly, and the next thing I know, my alarm's going off.
Wow.
I get up, and I'm like, wow, I really have had 3 hours sleep. Didn't expect to sleep that long. Went downstairs, got my gear on again, got all my stuff that had been charging, had some more lasagna, had a bowl of rice pudding and some other bits and bobs. And then had my feet looked at for the first time properly, and they like lanced, like burst all my blisters and taped them all up and everything.
Yeah.
And I set off from there at probably about 11 o'clock at night, with all my feet taped up. Felt good. I felt like a new man after having a 3 hour sleep. It actually felt like it was a new day, weirdly. Like it's weird that you could think that 3 hours feels like a full night's sleep.
I've heard it so many times, that people come into these checkpoints absolutely destroyed, broken, and then like you say, 3 hours or even less, someone looks after their foot. I mean, their volunteers are amazing, aren't they? What they do, and the medics, and then I've heard that so many times, come out, I'm like a fresh man, ready to go.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's true. Yeah.
It is true, yeah. But the medics are great. I mean, all the volunteers are brilliant, but I feel sorry for the medics having to like deal with people's feet constantly, because they were saying like in the summer that there's more instances of blisters in the summer because people's feet swell, and if it rains, then you've got that added thing. Whereas in winter, you're less likely to get blisters because your feet don't swell. They're cold and they're wet, but if you can keep them from getting blisters, they don't swell the same. So I felt a little bit relieved that they're saying, oh, we've seen worse, don't worry yourself. It's like, well, if other people have been through and they've got worse feet than me, then I've got nothing to complain about. So they take me up, and I set off. The sun was going down. Got my head torch on again that I've been charging. Got my headphones in, listened to, got some podcasts going, some Ultrarunning podcasts. And just settled into what is supposed to be probably one of the more boring sections from Alston. So after Alston to Bellingham, it's the least amount of elevation and everything on that section.
Yeah, it looks it's on the map. I'm just looking at the map as you describe it. Yeah,
and you're just sort of going over fells and stuff and moors, and there's nothing really and farmland and stuff. There's not a massive amount of interesting stuff to look at. A couple of road crossings and railway crossings and stuff. It's kind of like sort of in between the interesting stuff. And then got to Bellingham. I felt tired and thought I need to sleep again. So I had a bit of food, got my sleeping kit out, and they've got tents there. So there was no bunkhouse to sleep in there. They just got tents out in the field. And it was sort of late afternoon, mid-afternoon, late afternoon when I got there. So I felt tired and I thought I want to sleep because it's another, it's another day, gone through another night again. Maybe I can sleep. So I tried to sleep, but I could not sleep at all. I probably got like 20 minutes of just sort of closing my eyes and nodding off and waking up again. So I just thought I may as well just get up and carry on. So got up, got on my feet.
Which are you at now at Bellingham? What is you sort of done 100 miles, 120 miles at this point?
Yeah, something. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so it's before. So it'd be about 120 because the last section's like 40 miles.
Okay. Yeah.
Just under 40 miles. So it would have been around the 120 mark, something like that.
And have you had any thoughts at this point of like I could DNF or my mates won't rip me if I've done 120 miles?
No,
Amazing achievement getting there. Did that ever come into your mind? Because like you're getting to the back end of the race now, or was yours, no, I'm good to go, I know I'm in pain and I'm not good. No, I haven't had enough sleep, but I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, it's weird. I think I was just fully convinced, right from the first, as soon as I ran through that first night and I slept and then set off again and felt good, I knew that I would finish the race, and I knew that all I needed to do was just keep moving and just keep plodding on, and the miles will tick off. In fact, my watch, my ancient Garmin Phoenix 3, whatever it is, ran out of battery on the first morning. It ran out of battery, so I tried to charge it while I was running, and when I tried this at home, it worked. So you could charge it while you were doing an activity, but for some reason it wouldn't charge. So I got my battery pack and I got my the adapter for it and stuff. And I was trying to charge it while I was running, and it would charge for like a minute, and then I'd look back down at it again and it would go off, and it had gone off charge. So I'd have to put it on charge again. And I did this probably for about half an hour. Of kept trying to get it to charge, and in the end I just thought, why am I stressing myself out with this when all I need to do is, worst case scenario, I've got on my phone, I've got all trails, I've got the route on all trails, I've got I've even got the open tracking, I've even got that as well, that I can see the route on. So why am I faffing around? If I can follow the route by following the signs and what's obvious, if I have any trouble, I'll just sort of refer to my phone and have a look at that. Because even when there's no signal, if you've been looking at the map, the GPS will still pick your position up anyway, so you still know that you're on the route even if you've got no phone signal. So I kind of felt confident in that, knowing that I just needed to sort of trust my instincts, and I've got quite a good sense of direction. I don't tend to get lost that often, so I thought if I can just sort of stay on the route, and then if I have any sort of question marks over where I'm going, I can refer to my phone if I need to. But hopefully it's a bit more obvious, apart from when it's sort of at night. So at that point, I kind of sort of forgot about the mileage, and I kind of, at first I was checking the mileage and going into the checkpoint when I was like, okay, yeah, it's like 37, 38 miles, thinking, it's going to take this long. And I was a little bit obsessed over mileage at that point. But once my watch stopped working, it's kind of like it was a bit of relief, because in my head I'd envisioned like looking at my watch and seeing it going from 99 miles to 100 miles, and then like sending a message to Kate saying, I've done 100 miles now, that's it, no turning back. But that point came and went without me even knowing. So I got to Bellingham and then I'd done like 120 miles and not even realized that I'd gone past 100 miles, just because I was suffering towards the end of that section to get to Bellingham. So I had some food there, set off again sort of in the evening, sort of tea time. I thought, this is it, this is the final push. I knew that all I've got to do is like more or less 40 miles from that point.
Other ultra.
So the next, and I knew that there was a checkpoint, like a checkup point. So it's not a full checkpoint, but it's like I forget what they call them now, just like not like a safety check, just like a Basically it's a place where you can get water and they check on you, just like check that you're okay to carry on and stuff like that. So I got to there, which was at Burness, so that's right on the borders.
Yeah.
It's quite picturesque there. So you go through the forest and everything and drop down to that checkpoint. Normally it's down at the bottom on the road, but it was further up on the hillside. And went in there, had my feet looked at. They sort of decided that they weren't going to sort of do any major work on them, just sort of put a bit of extra tape on and stuff and change my socks. But when I got there and they were sort of checking my feet out, I was sat down. So this time it was sort of probably about 12:30 at night. And I just suddenly felt really tired, to the point where it was like, like Lance in a blister, and I was falling asleep while I was doing it, like sort of nodding off. And he was like, do you want a coffee? I was like, yeah, coffee would be great. So he made me a coffee, and I was drinking this coffee with 2 sugars in, sort of trying to wake myself up, but just feeling so like exhausted and tired. But I wasn't exhausted. I'd got like energy for running, but I just felt like I wanted to sleep. So he said to me, there's 50 yards down the trail, there's a public toilet. So, and it's open. So the disabled door is open. If you want to go in there and bivvy, you can go in there and get half an hour. If if you're desperate for sleep, then I'd recommend going in there.
It's not exactly the Premier Inn.
It's not exactly the Premier Inn, is it? So I thought, do feel really tired. So I walked out of that checkpoint with my coat on, with my like mid-layer puffer jacket on, thinking I'm going to stay warm. I'm going to get in that toilet block, and I'm going to get in my bivvy. I'm going to have half an hour just to try and reboot myself.
Yeah.
So I've got all my stuff laid out on the floor, got my torch and everything, all my stuff ready for like after I finished having a sleep, ready to pack into my bag again. And then I got my bivvy out, stood in my bivvy, started to pull it up, and got to the point where I was about to sort of lie down on the floor. And I realized that the coffee that I'd had with 2 sugars had just kicked in, and I felt absolutely wide awake. So I was like, why am I doing this? I feel absolutely wide awake. I feel like I've got energy to run. I can't have a bivvy now. I'm not going to sleep. So I just packed all my stuff away again, and then carried on the descent down to Burness, and then knew that I'd got the climb up onto the Cheviots to sort of get through. And then once I was on the Cheviots, I knew that I'd only sort of got like 25 miles to go. So I was thinking, it's a trail marathon. To get to the finish, I'll be there sort of, try and finish, tomorrow morning at some point. So it was quite warm in the valley down at Burness. So I'd stripped down to like just a t-shirt and shorts again, after sort of having my jacket on coming over the hills. But once I'd done the climb up onto the Cheviots, I didn't realise how abrupt that climb is. You straight up with a bit of scrambling to get onto the top of it. Once I got, say again.
Proper mountains there, the Cheviots.
Yeah.
700 meters again, something like that, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't look at the climb, but I know it was a decent climb to get up onto the top. But once I got to the top, it was blowing an absolute gale up there, and there was fog and it was cold, to the point where I stopped and literally put all of my layers back on again. So I got my waterproofs on again. I even put my woolly hat on to keep my ears warm.
Wow.
And then just like trudged on across there, and all of the sheep that are up there. So all you could see was fog, like blackness, inky blackness, this wind that was howling across, and then occasionally you'd see these eyes staring back at you. And the sheep, for some reason, they like to congregate on the trail. So as you're running towards them, and they're asleep. So some of them are asleep, some of them are awake, and you've got to wake them up as you're going through. So I spent a lot of time sort of shouting at sheep to wake them up, to get them to move off the trail. so that I didn't have to sort of go off the trail and go round them and everything because it was boggy. So that was interesting. And then,
can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah, go on.
Because it's just come into my head. Was there any? Did you have any hallucinations? You know, were they sheep there? I think because you hear about. I've had it very occasionally, but obviously you hear about it on the spine and longer ultras. So,
well, the weird thing was that I didn't have any hallucinations at night at all in the dark, and not sure, and I think that's possibly because it was so, you know, when it was dark enough so that all I'd got my head torch on, it sort of on spotlight, just so I could just see the trail basically, and nothing else. I didn't have it set so that I could sort of see the surrounding area, because that Phoenix head torch that I've got, brilliant by the way, really good. It's got like 2 settings on it. You've got like a sort of like a floodlight one, and then you've got a spot one, and I just kept it on the spot just sort of so I could just see purely what was in front of me. So at night, other than sort of seeing eyes staring back at me from the sheep and everything, I didn't have any hallucinations. The weird ones that I had were in the daytime. So when I was sleep deprived, getting to Bellingham, there's a section where you have to go through. No, it's not that section. It's after Bellingham. So from Bellingham, where you climb out of Bellingham, and you go through like a forest. There's a forest trail. You sort of skirt the edge of the forest, and there's all these trees that are tipped over. So I think it was from when they had the storms, and they're all tipped over, like with the roots sort of sticking.
I've heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you look at them in the distance, they're like black and brown shapes. So with my mind, they all turned into black bears. So yeah, because we talked about bears, haven't we, before? Like, but you know, when I went to Canada looking for black bears and everything, but that's all I saw was these black bears in the distance, just stood, like sort of looking at me. And then when I got to them, because it was at like the half light, so it was kind of like at that point it was about 10:30 at night, and the sun hadn't gone down properly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of half light. It wasn't dark enough to put a head torch on, but it was sort of, you were kind of like trying to focus on where you were going, because there wasn't quite enough light to see perfectly where you were going. So I think the combination of the half light and these shapes,
body clock around that time would be sort of, you'd be ready for going to bed.
ready for bed. Yeah, because 10 o'clock is my bedtime, so 10:30 would be, you know, when I would be like fully wanting to go to sleep. So, which explains why I was like really tired when I got to Burness, to the checkpoint at that point. But I think before, I had another one when I got to just before Bellingham. There was a forest section where you run through the trees, and there was the same again. It was a tree that had gone over, and it was the roots, but you could sort of see the side profile of it, and it looked like the Grim Reaper. So it was like a tall hooded figure with like a black robe on with a hood, no like scythe or anything, but just sort of stood, a black figure with like a dark face, like looking at me. And I was talking to myself at the time, going, I know it's not real. I know, you know, it's nonsense. All it is just like a black shape. And as close as I got to it, I realised that it wasn't that. And then after that, I saw another bear and stuff in the distance. But I didn't get anything like people were saying, like they had conversations with people, or they saw like monkeys and things like that. I didn't have anything. All mine was sort of stationary shapes.
Yeah.
That I didn't interact with. They were just sort of things that I saw in my mind convinced me that there were, you know, it was a bear. I saw one of our cats. So we've got 2 cats. We've got 2 cats one's called Rufus and one's called Jasper. And Jasper's like a typical black cat. And I saw him on the trail curled up, like in front of me, to the point where I actually like spoke to him, and I was like, Jasper, get off the trail.
Amazing how the mind and the body and how it can play tricks on you.
Yeah. Yeah,
sleep deprived and at that state. Yeah,
I think that's what it was.
it's
Yeah,
obviously interesting to ask you that. Yeah,
yeah, no, that's it's good to bring that up because I think the just not really knowing how I would be with the sleep deprivation, like because I thought that I'd got through the first night unscathed, and having 3 hours sleep made me feel like a new man. So I just assumed that if I got a little bit more sleep, that I'd be able to go through the next night perfectly as well. But obviously, only at Bellingham, only getting like 20 minutes sort of napping didn't really do the trick. I felt tired on that when I got to Burness and was trying to sleep, but then realised the coffee had sort of scuppered that idea. So I then was going through the night again over the Cheviots. And I had a great section sort of in the dark, like trying to catch up with. So second lady was in front of me, Katie, I can't remember her last name. And she was sort of, I could see on the tracker that she was sort of probably about 10, 15 minutes ahead of me. So I sort of viewed that as like, my goal was to try and stay with her or try and catch her up at some point on Cheviots. So she was always sort of ahead of me. So I caught up with her just before we got to Hut 1. And she decided she was going to have a little sleep in Hut 1. And when you get to, sort of being involved with the spine, I know that when you look at the map and you see everyone come across the Cheviots and it's the last final push, I always, in my head, I envision Hut 1 and Hut 2 as being like really close to the finish.
Yeah,
but in reality, like Hut 1 is 16 miles from the end and Hut 2 is like nearly 7 miles from the end. So I'd got to Hut 1 and I was like, this is great. I'm at Hut 1. I feel okay. I've got energy. The sun's coming up.
yeah.
I'll be home and dry like this morning. It'll be absolutely fine. It's great. I'm going to just like rock this next section. So I set off there feeling confident. I had a really special moment when the sun was coming up and I could see a group of the Cheviot, I don't even know if it's supposed to say Cheviot or Cheviot, goats, like the ones, obviously that's why that is famous, isn't it, for the goats. These big black goats with these horns and stuff. They all came like sweeping across the trail in front of me, and I like managed to get a photo of them and like watch them like sort of tootle off, and the sun was like rising behind him, and I was like, this is great. This is like a moment I'll always remember this moment, like a proper close to the end of the race. I'll always sort of have that picture in my mind. And then the sun came up, it started to warm up. I started to sort of feel like this like feels a bit too warm, even though it's like early in the morning. So I was like stripping off layers again. And then I started to feel really tired again. And I was thinking, I shouldn't feel tired now because the sun's come up. I should feel like it's a new day again.
Yeah.
But obviously that's sort of not factored in the fact that I'd already gone through 2 nights and only had 3 hours sleep.
Really catching up with you now.
At this point, it had caught up with me finally. So to the point where I'd wandered off the trail because obviously my watch wasn't working and I was just using, and in theory, when I got to Hut 1, the checkpoint guy there, he was saying, I was telling him about having to follow my phone instead of my watch. He's like, oh, it's absolutely fine. You don't even need to look at a map now because there's a fence that goes all the way along the side of the trail. And if you follow the fence, then you'll always be within like, a couple of meters of the trails, even if the trail disappears. So I was like, okay, that's fine. But I was so tired that I'd wandered off and took like the trail forked like left and right. And even though I know I should have taken the left one and stayed next to the fence, I took the right one and wandered off course. And I was sort of like wandering delirious sort of thing. And I was like looking at, it was like, when you get those like sort of fissures in the bog that are like, it's like almost like a bog cliff. Yeah. It's like a hole, like a hollow. Yeah. And I was like looking at these thinking, I could just get my bivvy out, just get in my bivvy and climb in that hole.
Yeah.
I'd be out of the winds and out of the sun and I could have a nice little sleep in there. And I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm off course. I need to get back on course. Otherwise, if I go to sleep, like off course, then like the safety team are going to be like, what's he doing? He's gone off course and he's gone to sleep.
Yeah, they'll know. They might presume that you're in difficulties. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that, you know, I was thinking clearly enough to know that that was a stupid idea. So I managed to get, even though I was like gutted, I'd got to hike over all these like babies' heads to get back to the trail. You know, it's like when you like stepping on babies' heads, feeling demoralized because you're tired and got no energy. Managed to get back to the trail and just thought, right, I need to have a power nap now. Now I know I'm back on the trail. If I have a power nap now, then I can probably sort of save the last part of my race. And I knew that second lady, she was behind me by about 10-15 minutes. I thought, if I have a little sleep here where she can see me, when she comes through, she'll wake me up and I'll be fine. So I sort of sat down, kept my pack on and everything, and just sat down and leant against the fence, put my sunglasses on and just closed my eyes. And that was it. I was like asleep at the side of the trail. And sure enough, she like 15-20 minutes later, she came through. She was like, "Are you all right? You okay?" And I was like, "Yes, I'm okay. Thank you. I just needed, 5 minutes, and then I knew that you'd wake me up. So thank you. Don't wait for me. Just push on." So she kind of like pushed on, and I sort of got myself up, forced myself to have some caffeine. I got some caffeine bullets. I had a couple of them to try and jolt myself back awake again. Bit of food, and then just set off again, and all at the same time, like my feet, like absolutely screaming at me in pain. Nothing I could do about it. I'd even got some really strong painkillers with me as well. I got some cocodamol painkillers, thinking that I wouldn't use them, thinking that I'd got like paracetamol, and thinking that I'd have the occasional paracetamol if something hurt. But I literally, like, I was waiting. At this point, every 4 hours, I was having a cocodamol, and it was just taking the edge off it slightly to the point where it was bearable. But I'd ran out of them by this point, so this was sort of halfway between hut 1 and hut 2, and I was sort of approaching hut 2, knowing that once I got to hut 2, there was only like 6.8 miles more or less down to Kirkyeatham. But the final descent down to hut 2 is quite steep, and my feet hurt so much that, the second place lady, Katie, we'd got to that point more or less together, and by the time I'd got a quarter of the way down, she was already at hut 2. She'd ran down and gone to the hole. And I was just literally just like baby steps down, like trying not to put weight, trying to use my poles. I'm surprised I didn't snap my poles. Trying to use my poles to sort of distribute my weight so my feet didn't hurt and stuff. Got to hut 2, and it's only like 6.8 miles to the end. It's basically 10k. And I was, laughing, saying this is like, this is shorter than my like normal commute to work. I should be able to just like go, see, yeah, I'm off and go to the finish. But I was stuck there because I had to wait for the medic to sort out my blisters. So I got another pair of socks, and I was like, all right, I'm going to wear these other socks, even though it's only like 6 miles to the end.
Yeah.
And she sorted my feet out, and just did a great job of doing that. It took longer than I thought it would to do it. It probably took like 20 minutes to patch them up. In the meantime, like 2 people like passed me and like finished. And I just thought by that point, I was just so happy that I knew that I was going to finish. I wasn't bothered about position, because I'd gone from like 8th place to like 10th to 12th. But I wasn't bothered, because, years and years of running and doing well in races, winning ultras, podiuming in ultras. I was worried that I would have that kind of mentality of wanting to do really well. But I think because it's such a different race for me, I'd written that off right from the start. It was never about like position and speed. It was just about purely trying to figure out if I can actually go that far. So knowing that I'm right at the end, and it was a real struggle, even though my feet were patched up. She was like, right, I want to see you run. I want to see you run from here and see how far you can run. And I did run from the checkpoint, like wincing with every step. And I managed to get up the next climb. And then I started to drop down. But as soon as I started to drop down, make the final descent down to Kirkyeatham, probably got like 2 or 3 miles of just descending.
Yeah.
The pain was just like absolutely like unbearable, like my feet screaming at me, these blisters just absolutely screaming at me. And I was like, that was a low point. I think because I was so close to the end, it felt so far away, even though it was only like 3 miles.
Yeah.
And my phone was going off because everyone could see that I was so close to the end.
We was all watching, weren't we? You know?
Yeah, so our WhatsApp group, our running WhatsApp group, was like lighting up with messages, like with people, come on, you're there, you're right at the end, come on, move faster. And I was just like, I was at the point where I was just like, I just wanted to sit down and cry because my feet hurt so much. And I just walked for probably about 2 miles. I walked, refusing to run. And then I got some more messages with people saying, come on, get moving. And I was like, right, I've got to run. So I managed to sort of pick myself up and power hiked up the last little climb, which just seems like massive, even though it's not massive at all. And you're on tarmac road then, right to the end. And I just managed to sort of plod my way down and just managed to jog it in and run over the line finally and made it there. And I've seen the video. I've got a video of me like finishing. And I look like, apart from slurring my words like a couple of times, I look absolutely fine. And I'm like thinking, I didn't feel absolutely fine at that point. I felt absolutely destroyed and like on another planet.
Yeah. Crossing that finish line, is it one of those things where at the time you just, like you described, it's just ready to finish, and then 48 hours, a week later, you can reflect on the feelings? Or did you have a feeling of, wow, this is something big I've achieved?
No, I was so hacked off with my feet and so wanted to finish that I knew that you always have a fuss made of you whenever whoever finishes, whatever distance, whatever position they come in, all of the staff all make a real fuss of you, and like everybody cheers, everybody knows your name because they've been watching you come in for like the last 2 hours. Everybody knows you, and they know finishing, and they make a real big deal of it, and everybody gets the same like post-race interview on camera and everything, and they ask you questions about your race. And I knew that was coming, but I was so like desperate to finish and so wanted it to be over that I just wanted to like just bypass the finish line and just run straight into the hotel and not talk to anybody. And I was expecting to feel like this like emotion and elation of seeing the finish line and knowing I'd finished. And because I've seen so many people at that finish like in tears crying, like that they'd finished any of the distances, just, you know, even people crying, you know, just finishing, you know, like the Challenger South and like Challenger North and stuff, just being so emotional about it, let alone doing the full spine. And I thought that I would be emotional, but I wasn't at all. I was just sort of like, job's done.
Yeah, I guess we all react differently if we're physically, mentally, emotionally spent. People react differently, don't they?
Yeah, I think I probably ran out of emotions. I think that's probably was in that last section. I think I probably just drained myself of all emotion and just turned into like an ultra running robot that just needed to just finish. I think that's what it was.
So what's the etiquette as you cross the line? Do you kiss the wall? Do you touch the wall? Do you kick the wall?
Well, apparently there is. I think it was the consensus. The consensus at the winter race was that you could only kiss the wall if you'd done the full spine.
Okay.
So I'd in my head, I'd got that in my head that I wasn't going to kiss the wall, and literally all you can do is touch the wall. So that's what I did. I just went and touched the wall, and a few people sat in the plant pot and stuff, like John Kelly style. But I didn't really have, in fact, I crossed the line and forgot that I needed to go to the, you know, I've been there telling people you need to run to the wall, thinking, why don't people know to run to the wall? And I was one of those people that just crossed the line thinking I was done. And everyone's going, run to the wall. And I was like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten about that. It's amazing how your mind just blanks.
Yeah. So you've had time to reflect on it now. So just a couple of questions I was thinking. We say this in the fire service after we've finished an incident or something. What went well and what could we have done better? I suppose it's putting a positive slant on it. So what would you say was one of the biggest things that went well for you and that you can take now into the winter?
I think running through the nights, I was worried about how I would be that I was worried that I would have issues with sleep deprivation literally on the first night. That was my worry, was that I wouldn't even be able to get through that first night without thinking, oh, I really need to sleep. So I was impressed with how I handled that, and I think that was a real confidence booster for me, to know that I could run, you know, bar stopping like once or twice for a bit of food. I know I can run for 24 hours, and it wasn't a major issue to do that without sleep. And even the fact that I managed to get through the next 2 nights on like 20 minutes and 10 minutes, which is, I find like amazing that your body can do that. So I think that I did well. I think my kit was good. I never had any issues with kit, other than, I suppose, in hindsight now, looking at the things that I could have done better, that falls into the category of kit, as far as like my feet and caring for my feet. So I'd always thought that any of the summer races, regardless of the distance, blisters weren't an issue, unless something went majorly wrong with your shoe or something, you got the wrong shoe on or something was rubbing. I didn't expect to have any issues with blisters at all. So that was a major surprise for me, even though in hindsight it wasn't, because everybody was saying to me before the race, like, look after your feet, do this with your feet, do that. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I'll be all right. Yeah, there's no problem. Yeah, I'm not expecting to, because I've not had any trouble with blisters, thinking that, you know, I wouldn't have any trouble in this race. So that was a bit naive of me to think that I could get through the whole distance and not suffer with blisters. And so I think that's the thing that I've taken away from it. I was really happy with my kit, as far as like that pack. I didn't want to take that. It's that Montane Gecko pack, 20-litre Gecko pack. It fit everything in perfectly. And it was so comfortable that I didn't want to take it off. So if I was stopping to do something, I didn't want to take it off, because once I took it off, I could actually feel the weight of it in my hand.
I'm with you, yeah.
Realize how heavy it was. But as soon as I put it on, it felt like I wasn't even wearing it. It was weird. It was like I wasn't even wearing a pack. I've never had that. Yeah. Even with like my running, commuting and using a pack and having stuff in there, I think the design of it is like spot on. Shout out to Montane, you got that right. Yeah,
I recommend the
yeah.
use that in the winter as well. Or
well, I don't know if it's going to be big enough.
Okay.
I think I'm probably going to need something like 30 litres. So even though it was 20, they call it a 20 plus, because it's 20 litres plus all the pockets on it that you can fit extra stuff in. So I don't know whether I could get away with it. Maybe get away with that and then have like a chest pod with stuff in, or a waistband with stuff in as well, and possibly do it that way to carry the extra kit. Yeah, I think so. So I was really impressed with that. So, but I will look into having more pairs of socks.
Usually waterproof socks. Would you go for the waterproof socks
in
summer?
in winter. Yeah, so in summer they just make your feet sweat, don't they? If you're wearing them, it's not cold.
Yeah.
So you have trouble with your feet getting wet anyway because they sweat. So I think for winter, I'm going to go for the combo that most people go for, which is like covering your feet in trench cream, in the barrier cream, and then having thin toe socks, and then having waterproof socks over the top of them. That seems to be the thing that people do for winter, from sort of asking around and on the Facebook page and everything. So that's what I'm gonna.
Same trainers. I mean, I think.
I think I'm gonna go. What I realised was that I only took 2 pairs of trainers with me. So I had my Saucony Endorphin Trails, and I love them. They're super comfortable.
Yeah.
But I think over long distance, they I think that was probably the issue with them being narrow. Right. So I don't think they helped with blisters on the end of my toes, because they were quite narrow at the end. Even though my feet don't feel like they're crammed in on them like other shoes, they've always felt quite wide fit to me anyway. I think just the narrow toe, very end of the toe, was just rubbing on my big toe and my little toe. So when I swapped to my Ultras, they immediately felt like I got more room, obviously because there is more room in them. But I was but I couldn't have done the distance in them because they were lone peaks, so they're not as
Yeah.
not as cushioned as the Saucon is. So
Is it the Olympus that Andy uses?
yeah, I've got the Olympus,
Yeah.
but they sometimes feel too much cushioning on them sometimes. So
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna, now that I know that my knee is okay to a certain degree, running in them again, I might possibly for the winter spine go back to running in ultras again, knowing that there's more room in them.
Okay.
And my feet are less likely to rub.
Interesting. So big lessons. I think one thing that I noticed when I was watching the highlights is, and probably changing the subject a little bit, is the age group hit me, that were, they were all, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but 40 upwards.
Yeah.
People in their 60s, which is amazing to see, and it's inspiring to me. Why is that? Why isn't there any 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds ripping up the Pennine Way and a new FKT?
Yeah, I think it attracts, because I kind of wrote the race off originally as being like because it's a foot race, it's not a running race. There's no, even, I've watched, Damo and Jack and everything, and nobody can run the full Pennine Way. Maybe they've done it when they've been doing their FKTs, but doing the spine race with all the kit you've got to carry and everything, it's not as much running as another ultra, because physically you can't run 268 miles of the Pennine Way with like 7 or 8 kilos worth of kit on your back, realistically run it all. So I think it attracts like people, that age demographic of being like in your 40s, probably like a bit of a midlife crisis type thing. So if you've kind of, if you've already previously had your ultra running midlife crisis in your 30s, then it's like the next level of midlife crisis later in years. And I think that probably, I mean, like as you get older, your speed goes down, but your endurance goes up. So I think, and especially with your experience in life, you kind of more set up for longer challenges. I think, like with your own resilience, problem solving and stuff, the older you are, more life experience you've got. I think that kind of plays into this kind of race, that you can make decisions and make wise choices, problem solve, because you've had a life of doing that. Whereas, like a 21-year-old runner who's fast might be able to sort of, get part way up the spine fast, but then they might not have the mental capacity and the resilience to be able to finish the race strong, because they've not got that life experience. And make myself sound like an old git now.
No, but I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, how life, as you get older, and the experiences in life can prepare you for a running race. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, and probably does answer the question as to why the majority are 40 plus, and they're still active, still doing an amazing.
Or it's that they're only financially in a position where they can afford to buy all the kit for the race.
Definitely. Yeah, it's not to be sniffed at, is it? I mean,
and pay the entry fee as well. So I that was one of the things that put me off originally, was the price of entering the race. Like, what is it, like 1,100 quid, something, 1,200 quid. So because I won my place in the lottery, I was like, well, I've saved myself $1,000 there. I can spend money on kit, and I can spend money on doing one of the other races with my volunteer discount. I can do that, and then I've still quids in for the race.
I think it's about £85 for a mountain rescue place, for the Challenger South.
Is it? Is there any places left for?
Not for the winter, no.
No,
I did look originally, and then I quickly shut the website down because I was getting involved in something for somewhere I didn't want to be. So yeah, brilliant. So how's the recovery going? I mean, that's got to be the big question, because I mean, again, this is debatable, but running's healthy for you. Ultra running is
Mm,
detrimental to the body. It has, I mean, that's publicized now,
mm,
over the 50, 60, 100 miles, 160 miles. You're not going to be physically any better for it, really. I mean,
no.
it's a massive achievement, but how's your recovery going?
So initially, it was the blisters were like the major thing initially, like the first couple of days. And then I had, like, because I've had issues with my knee, my right knee, that was visibly swollen on the sort of lateral side, whereas all the pain I've been having was always medial side. So I thought that's probably something a bit different to that's just purely just like the mileage that's done that. And that hurt on the first and second night. They just lying in bed, I couldn't get my leg into a position that didn't hurt my knee. So I was taking some anti-inflammatories for that. But once I got through that second night, my knee started to feel better again, and the swelling went down, and that sort of disappeared. But my sort of muscles, like my quads and everything like that, and my calves, they all sort of dissipated within, the normal DOMS sort of time scale of sort of like 2 to 3 days. They all disappeared. But the thing that I've been left with is just like an overwhelming feeling of fatigue that seems to come and go in waves. So I'll get up in the morning and I'll feel fine, feel really good, and I'll get to like mid-afternoon and I'll just feel absolutely drained. Like at the point where you're normally sort of feeling a bit snoozy anyway, it's sort of magnified by 10. And just the point where I've been at work and I've just been at work and just wishing that I could just lie down on the floor and just have a little sleep in the middle of the afternoon. Even though I've been having I've not forced myself to get up early for anything other than one job this week where I had to be up at 5 o'clock to go and drive down south to do a job. And by the end of that day, I felt absolutely destroyed. And the next day I felt really tired from that. And I realized that I think it's like systematic fatigue. So it's not like day to day, it's just overall, I feel like my body is still, even though like muscles have recovered, joints have recovered, blisters are starting to sort of, callus up now and feel like I can walk on them okay and not really notice that they're there anymore. But it's just the overall feeling of feeling like I'm looking forward to having a lie in at the weekend sort of thing. And trying to get as much sleep as I can this weekend, even though like last weekend I tried to do the same, just lay on the sofa watching Western States on YouTube.
You wasn't there this year.
No, I wasn't there this year, and I had really bad FOMO about it because I got all, because I made some friends over there and they were all like texting me, sending me photos of them like running on all the like famous like sections like Forest Hill and Michigan Bluff, and then down on the track and stuff, and just feeling like I've missed out on something again. But I've vowed to go back. I will. That is a race that I am going to try and get into. So I'm going to try and put in for the lottery to get into that race. But in the meantime, if I can afford it, I would quite happily go back and volunteer at that race every year. Because it's such an amazing. I love California so much. I would literally like if the wife and kids were up for it, I would move there. I love it that much. So I'll keep going back if I can. So I felt like a bit gutted watching it on YouTube rather than being there running with a camera, filming them. So, but you can't have everything, can you?
You can't do everything, can you? So hopefully now, so you're looking at what we're looking at with July tomorrow, aren't we? So we're looking at 6 months training now for the winter.
Yes.
So, have you got any thoughts in mind now? How we talked about you can't really prepare. I suppose you've built up some experience now. You've got lessons that you've learned. You've obviously loads of research. You know the route so well. What is your idea now from now to the winter? What you're thinking in your mind as preparation for it?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to building my mileage back up again with the aim of sort of being in the range of 60 to 70 miles a week, getting that back. So now I know that, previously building my mileage up before this race and then it taking a dip after this race, I know that I can sort of fall back into sort of 40 to 50 miles a week and then build it back up to the 70 range, and know that I don't really need to go much further than that. You know, when you look at like Damien Hall's training, he's of an age now, he's sort of in his 40s, late 40s, and I think he's run so many miles over the years that he doesn't need to run any more than like 70, 75 miles. I think occasionally he peaks for a race, he'll do like a 90-mile week or a 100-mile week, but he's not banging in like some ultra runners are like banging in 100 and 130-mile weeks, like week after week. But I know that my body can't sustain high mileage anymore. So I know that I'm going to kind of build my mileage up to a certain point and then just keep ticking over and then do some really specific stuff. So I'm either going to do, so Andy's arranged a trip to go and do the West Highland Way, hasn't he, in September? Yeah. So I'm hoping to do that with him. Or I've got my eye on possibly doing the 13 Valleys race in the Lake District, which is end of September, and that's like 114 miles. It looks like on the GPX, and I know that will be sort of Lake District miles. It'll be bad weather, hopefully. Test all my kit. So I think that would be like a good sort of mid-autumn race to kind of get some more miles back in the legs and some bad weather experience going into January. But also there's one section between Hebden Bridge and Hawes that I haven't ran. So at some point in probably November or December, I'm going to go back and do that and do an overnight run. Yeah. Do that. So I think it's about 60 miles, something like that I haven't done. So I'm going to go back and do that in one hit as like my final preparation and try and do it as reasonably close to the race as possible, so that I try and get the full winter weather and do it dark at night and go through the night and do that as my final prep for January.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's been a real insight, especially perhaps looking at the mid-pack. The people you've interviewed have been a lot of the elites, and
that's it.
We touched on it just very briefly. We touched on the capabilities, but who do you think could do the spine? Perhaps maybe could they look at doing the sprint first, maybe, or the south?
Yeah, I think that was
summer first, or just go for the win.
That was always my original plan when I decided I was going to eventually do the full race, was that I was going to do the sprint. And that was obviously when the sprint out was a summer race when they first put that on. So I did that with the intention of then going and doing like winter, Challenger South, Challenger North, and then doing the full. But because I got kind of thrown into having to be doing the full in winter anyway, I then decided to skip Challenger South and just go straight for Challenger North, because that's the section that I don't know other than going on the race, like when I've been volunteering and going and up and down the checkpoints, that I know the least amount of that, whereas the lower section I've ran a lot of those areas I've run in races or sort of on my own sort of expeditions and stuff, so I kind of know that section. So for me that was what I wanted to do. And I think for people wanting to do it, I suppose the summer presents its own challenges in itself, like with the issues with blisters and the issues with heat and heat exhaustion and stuff, that kind of thing. It's saying that the summer is like the easier option on paper, it is, but in reality it's got different problems that you've got to overcome. So either way, you're overcoming your problem solving and overcoming things that you've got to deal with that come at you in the heat of the moment, in the middle of the race. So I don't know whether it's if people want to do the full winter race, then maybe take a chance and just go for one of the longer winter races. If you want to sort of do as a test to do the Challenger South or Challenger North, at least on the North the checkpoints are closer together, So that's a good, that sort of comfort thing. But I don't think that, because it's more of a mental challenge, more of a thing about your endurance over a long distance and handling yourself and handling sleep deprivation and everything. I don't think that having to be like a pure ultra runner is like essential. I think that if you've got outdoor experience, you've got a mindset where you can keep going and keep going, then I think that's possibly going to be the thing that's going to trump, perfect training leading up to it. So I sort of took a chance on that, didn't have perfect training, and dived straight into 160 miles after only doing like 100k. So I could have got to like 100 miles and decided to quit, thinking that that's far enough, I can't run any further. But in reality, I always knew once I'd set off and once I got through that first night, I kind of knew that I was going to do the full distance. So I think if anyone's thinking about doing it, but they're sort of worried about their abilities, I think you probably don't need to worry about your ability as much as if you've got the mindset that you're determined to finish it, then that's probably going to be more in your favour than having perfect training.
Yeah, and I guess it boils down to that age-old question of when's the right time. Well, there's never the right time, is there? Just sometimes you've got to take the plunge, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Roll the dice, chips to the wind, and see what you can. Well, massive congratulations, because whatever happens now, that's a great achievement, isn't it? And we're all jealous. We're all jealous that you've done it, and it's we're not worthy to be on the WhatsApp group with you anymore. as a spine finisher. So yeah. So thank you very much for letting me come on your podcast. And
thank you for the turning the tables on me and letting me talk probably too much more than I would normally talk.
Yeah, and I guess people look forward to you being back in the chair. And I know there's a few people.
Well, I know we joked about this, but we talked about this before about having you come on and being my fell running correspondent for talking about all the shorter stuff, more short, interesting stuff. So in my head, I'd got a feature where I was going to call it Hell's Bells. It's Ben Fells runs fells. Ben Wells runs fells.
Yeah, well, I try. Yeah.
So you for the people watching and listening, it might not be the last time that your friendly face is on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll see how many downloads you get. Great stuff.
Cheers, mate.
All right.
Bye.